My name is Thomas Walker. I'm 67 years old, and this is the story I never thought I'd have to tell. For most of my life, I believed the worst pain a parent could feel was watching their child fall and not being able to help them up. I was wrong. The worst pain is holding your child's hand and realizing you're about to lose them forever. My daughter Lily was everything to me. She was the reason I kept going after my wife passed away 15 years ago. When cancer came for her, it felt like the world was taking its last bit of mercy from me. Lily wasn't just bright, she was brilliant. At 36, she had built a sustainable fashion empire from nothing, starting with handmade designs in our garage and turning it into a national brand, Luna Apparel. Her photo hung on billboards from Dallas to Denver, her smile confident, fearless, radiant. She loved creating clothes that made women feel strong. But in those final months, the glow that once surrounded her began to fade. The chemotherapy left her weak, her laughter quieter. Still, she never stopped working. Even from her hospital bed at Norman Regional, she held meetings, gave feedback, and smiled for her team. I sat beside her every night, reading the same weathered copy of To Kill a Mockingbird she used to love as a girl. She would tease me, "Dad, you've been stuck on the same chapter for 3 weeks." I'd smile and say, "I'm waiting for a happy ending." On a gray Thursday morning in March, Lily called me into her hospital room. The machines beeped softly. She looked so fragile in that moment, skin pale, hair thin, but her eyes still carried that fierce determination she'd had since childhood. "Dad," she said quietly, her voice trembling but steady, "I need you to know something." She reached for the nightstand and pulled out a sealed white envelope tied with a silver ribbon. "I've been getting everything ready for you. There's something inside that explains it all. My will, business transfers, and letters for you and Aunt June. I didn't want lawyers confusing things after I'm gone." I froze. I didn't want to talk about after. Not yet. "Lily, please, we don't have to do this today." She shook her head gently. "Dad, listen. You've already done enough for me. You worked 2 jobs when Mom died, just so I could finish school. You helped me buy the first sewing machine that started this business. I built my company, but you built my foundation. You're my only family, my only constant. Everything I've earned, it's yours now." Tears blurred my vision. I took the envelope, feeling the weight of it in my hands. "I don't care about the money, Lily," I whispered. "I just want you." She smiled softly. "I know. That's why I trust you with it." That was Lily, always calm when the world was falling apart. She leaned back against her pillow, exhausted. I held her hand as the sunlight filtered through the blinds, painting stripes of gold across the room. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Promise me one thing, Dad. Whatever happens, protect what we built. Don't let anyone ruin it." I squeezed her hand. "I promise." She smiled faintly and whispered, "Good." That was the last word she ever said to me. Lily passed away on March 10th, 2024, at 6:48 inches the morning. I was there when her breathing slowed, when the monitor flatlined, when the nurse quietly placed her hand on my shoulder. It's strange how silence can be so loud. I remember standing at the window of her hospital room afterward, watching the first light of dawn. The city outside was waking up, cars, people, life moving on while my world had stopped. That night, I went home to the house Lily had helped me renovate years ago. Everything in it reminded me of her: the paint colors she'd picked, the piano she never learned to play, the sketches she left on the coffee table. I sat at the kitchen counter and finally opened the envelope. Inside were neatly arranged documents: her last will and testament, signed and notarized by Sarah Klein, her family lawyer, transfer papers for her company shares, and a handwritten letter folded at the top. The letter began simply, "Dad, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't keep my promise to stay longer, but I need you to know I left everything to you, not because you need it, but because you deserve peace. You were a father and a mother to me after Mom died. Every success I had came from the love you gave me. I trust you more than anyone in this world. Please, protect what we built. Don't let the wrong people near it." She signed it with a small heart next to her name, just like she did when she was little. I cried until there were no tears left. The next few days were a blur: funeral arrangements, calls from relatives, flowers I didn't want. Everyone kept telling me she left a legacy. But legacies don't fill the empty chair at your kitchen table. Still, I felt some comfort knowing everything was secure. The will was clear. Her company, her assets, every penny she earned, all under my name now. But I was wrong to think peace would last. Because just 3 days later, during Lily's funeral at St. Peter's Church, I would see the last face I ever wanted to see again. And with him would come the beginning of the nightmare my daughter had tried to warn me about. The day of Lily's funeral felt unreal, as if I were walking through someone else's sorrow. The sky over Norman, Oklahoma, was heavy with clouds, the kind that promised rain but refused to fall. The church pews overflowed with people, her employees, her college friends, reporters from the local paper, even competitors who had once tried to destroy her business. I stood near the casket, shaking hands, offering empty smiles. My mind was somewhere else back in our living room, where Lily would hum to herself while sketching designs, her pencil tapping against the desk like a heartbeat. "Your daughter inspired so many of us," one of her business partners said softly. "She made people believe dreams and hard work could coexist." I thanked him, though my throat felt too tight to speak. All I wanted was to get through the ceremony, to let her rest in peace. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder. "Thomas." I turned and time stopped. There he was, Eric Dawson. 10 years older, but instantly recognizable. The man who had destroyed my daughter's peace and vanished like a ghost. His once boyish face had hardened, a well-tailored black suit clinging to his frame. His eyes, cold, deliberate, were wet with what looked like tears. "Eric," I said, barely more than a whisper, "what the hell are you doing here?" He gave a slow, sorrowful smile. "I came to say goodbye, Thomas, to the woman I loved." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My hands trembled. Every instinct told me to drag him out of the church. But the priest's voice echoed from the pulpit, calling for silence, and I didn't want to create a scene. Eric stepped closer to the casket. I watched him trace his fingers along the polished wood, his expression a performance of grief. "She didn't deserve this," he murmured. "I should have been there for her." The people around us whispered some, assuming he was a grieving husband. No one here knew the truth, that he'd abandoned her when she told him she was pregnant, that his disappearance had nearly killed her long before the cancer did. He sat 2 rows behind me during the Mass, sobbing loud enough for everyone to hear. When the choir sang Amazing Grace, I wanted to scream. After the service, as the crowd drifted outside into the cold breeze, I walked toward the cemetery gates. I could hear Eric's footsteps behind me. "Thomas, please," he called. "Can we talk?" I stopped and turned. The sympathy had vanished from his eyes. In its place was something sharper, an arrogance I remembered all too well. "There's nothing to talk about," I said flatly. "You lost the right to say her name 10 years ago." He smirked faintly. "You might think so, but legally, things are more complicated than you believe." "What's that supposed to mean?" He pulled a silver cigarette case from his jacket, lit one, and exhaled slowly, watching the smoke drift upward like he had all the time in the world. "I've been speaking with lawyers," he said. "It seems Lily and I were never properly divorced. Some filing error, maybe a missing document. I'll let the courts figure it out. But since we were still legally married, I have rights to her estate, to the company, to everything she built." I stared at him in disbelief. "You abandoned her. You emptied your accounts and ran off like a coward." His smile didn't fade. "And yet, the law doesn't care about feelings, does it?" My fists clenched. "You think you can just show up here after 10 years and steal from your dead wife?" He flicked his cigarette to the ground, crushing it under his shoe. "I'm not stealing. I'm reclaiming what's mine." I took a step forward, my voice shaking. "You left her with nothing. She rebuilt her life from the ashes you left behind." He leaned in slightly, his tone dropping to a whisper. "You'd be wise to lower your voice, Thomas. The media's been very interested in this story. A grieving husband denied his rights by an old man hungry for money. Imagine how it'll look when I tell them my version." My chest tightened. He wasn't just cruel, he was calculating. "Get out of here," I said, "if you have any decency left." "Decency?" He chuckled, stepping back toward his sleek black sedan parked along the curb. "Don't worry. I'll be in touch. My attorney will reach out soon. I just thought I'd give you a chance to do the right thing before this gets ugly." He opened the car door, then turned, one last time, his expression unreadable. "Oh, and Thomas, she might have written you into her will, but that won't matter once the truth comes out." The door shut, and the engine roared to life. His car rolled away slowly, the tires crunching over gravel, leaving a faint trail of dust that hung in the air long after he was gone. I stood there for a long time, staring at the disappearing taillights. Somewhere deep inside, I knew this wasn't over. Lily had warned me to protect what we built, but I hadn't realized how soon that promise would be tested. As the clouds finally broke, and rain began to fall over the cemetery, I whispered to her headstone, "Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll fight for you. I'll make sure he never touches a cent of what you built." But in that quiet, as the rain soaked through my coat and the world blurred around me, I felt the first flicker of fear, because Eric Dawson hadn't come back for closure. He'd come back for war. It didn't take long for Eric Dawson to make good on his promise. 3 days after the funeral, as I sat alone in Lily's office at Luna Apparel's headquarters, sorting through her belongings, a courier arrived with a thick brown envelope stamped "Confidential Legal Notice." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were 30 pages of legal documents, the kind that smell of fresh ink and bad intentions. At the top of the first page, I saw the name, Eric Dawson versus Thomas Walker. My stomach turned cold. The claim stated that Eric was the legal surviving spouse of Lily Walker, alleging that their divorce had never been fully executed due to an administrative oversight. He was demanding 50% of her estate, roughly $16 million, plus emotional restitution for alleged interference. With marital rights. It was written with the confidence of someone who believed he'd already won. That night, I drove to my lawyer's office. Sarah Klein had been Lily's legal guardian angel for years, sharp, composed, and loyal. She had drafted every contract Lily ever signed, from her company's incorporation papers to her final will. Sarah sat behind her oak desk, glasses low on her nose, as she read the complaint line by line. The ticking of the wall clock was the only sound between us. After 15 minutes, she looked up. "This is garbage, Thomas. Lily and Eric's divorce was finalized in 2014. I reviewed the court filings myself." "Then how can he claim it's not?" Sarah sighed, flipping to the last page. "He's exploiting a loophole. The court clerk's office made a clerical error years ago. One of the filing dates wasn't uploaded into the state's digital system. So technically, there's an argument the record looks incomplete. It doesn't mean the divorce isn't valid, but it's enough to drag this into court." She leaned back, frowning. "He's betting you'll settle before this becomes public." I clenched my fists. "He's not getting a dime." Sarah hesitated. "Then be ready, Thomas. Eric's lawyer, Martin Vaughn, is known for playing dirty. He's the kind who leaks stories to the press to turn sympathy into leverage." I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of it settle in my chest. When I left her office that evening, I saw a headline already circulating online. "Grieving husband fights for late wife's company after father blocks inheritance." Eric had wasted no time feeding his version of the story to the media. Reporters camped outside my driveway the next morning, shouting questions like vultures circling a wounded animal. I ignored them, retreating inside the quiet of my home. On Lily's desk sat a framed photo of us on her graduation day, her arms around me, her smile bright, the world wide open before her. She had survived so much, fought through every storm, and built everything with her bare hands. The thought of Eric claiming even a fraction of it made me sick. That night, I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the envelope again. There was a small, handwritten note tucked between the pages. I unfolded it. It was from Eric. "Thomas, I'm willing to make this easy. Give me my fair share, $15 million, and we'll avoid the pain of a public trial. If you refuse, I'll ensure every newspaper in Oklahoma prints the truth, that you manipulated your dying daughter for control of her empire. You have 1 week. After that, my lawyer proceeds." Eric. My hands shook as I finished reading. I wasn't angry anymore. I was something worse, calm. The kind of calm that comes before a storm. I picked up the phone and called Sarah. "He's threatening to smear Lily's name in the press. What can we do?" She exhaled slowly. "We prepare for battle. I'll pull every document, every signature, every witness we have. If he wants war, we'll give him one." But before hanging up, her tone softened. "Thomas, I've seen men like Eric before. They rely on grief. They think you're too broken to fight back. Don't let him be right. After we hung up, I walked into Lily's old studio, where her sketches still covered the walls. I ran my fingers across the designs, hundreds of them, hand-drawn in pencil, marked with notes like, "Needs stronger stitching," or "Add color here." Every one of them was proof of her persistence. I sat down and whispered, "You warned me, sweetheart. You told me to protect what we built. I'm sorry it took me this long to understand what you meant." Outside, the Oklahoma wind howled against the windows, rattling the frames like an omen. Somewhere, I imagined Eric sitting in his expensive apartment, thinking he'd scared me. But he hadn't. Because the man who had watched his daughter die was not afraid of another man's threats. That night, I opened my notebook and wrote 3 words under the date. Find his weakness. If Eric Dawson wanted a war over Lily's memory, I would give him one. Only this time, I wouldn't be the one on defense. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. I hadn't really slept. My mind had been running circles all night around the same thought. Eric Dawson wasn't bluffing. He had prepared this for months, maybe even years, and if he'd come this far, he had help. When grief turns to anger, something inside you changes. I wasn't the quiet old man sitting beside my daughter's hospital bed anymore. I was the father she had trusted to protect everything she left behind. By 7 a.m., I was driving through Norman's empty streets toward the old Luna Apparel headquarters downtown. The parking lot was still dark, but the front office lights glowed faintly. Amanda Cruz, Lily's personal assistant for the last 6 years, was already inside. Amanda had always been loyal, bright, organized, and protective of Lily like a sister. When she saw me walk in, her eyes filled with sympathy. "Mr. Walker, I still can't believe she's gone," she said softly. "I know," I answered. "But Amanda, I need your help. Something's happening, something bad." I showed her the lawsuit notice. She read every word, her face growing pale. "He's trying to take her company? He's claiming he was never divorced. He's after the money." Amanda hesitated, then bit her lip. "Mr. Walker, there's something you should know." She led me into Lily's private office, the one no one had touched since her passing. The air smelled faintly of her perfume and printer ink. On the desk sat her old phone, charger plugged in, the battery still blinking red. Amanda tapped the screen and opened the call logs. "For the last 3 months," she said, "that man's been calling here. Different names, every time. Mr. Lewis, Mr. Crane, Mr. Crane, Reddick. But it was always the same voice. I recognized it immediately." "Eric?" She nodded. He kept asking questions: how sick Lily was, whether she still had majority shares, whether she'd updated her will recently. The blood in my veins ran cold. "When I told Lily," Amanda continued, "she told me to hang up if he ever called again. Then she did something else. She opened her laptop and clicked on a folder titled Recordings. Lily asked me to record all office calls, just in case." Amanda played one of the files. Eric's voice: "Look, Amanda, I'm just checking in. I want to know if it's worth trying to make amends. If she doesn't have much left, I won't waste my time." Amanda looked at me, horrified. "That's from February 18th. I felt sick. My daughter had been fighting for her life, and this man, this leech, had been calculating how to profit from her death. I took a deep breath. "Amanda, do you still have her hospital visitor logins?" "Yes, but I think you should talk to Nurse Lowe. She was on Lily's night shifts near the end." That afternoon, I drove to Norman Regional Hospital. The scent of disinfectant still clung to the halls like a ghost. I found Nurse Samantha Lowe at the oncology wing, a kind, steady woman in her 40s who had cared for Lily like her own child. She recognized me instantly and took my hand. "Mr. Walker, I'm so sorry. Lily was one of the strongest patients I've ever known." "Thank you," I said quietly. "Samantha, I need to ask you something important, and I need the truth." She nodded slowly. "Did Eric Dawson visit my daughter in the hospital?" For a moment, she said nothing. Her lips parted, then closed again. Finally, she looked around to make sure we were alone. "Yes," she said softly. "Twice, late at night, around 2 a.m. He signed the visitor log as her spouse. The paperwork looked official, had her signature on it. I assumed it was legitimate." My breath caught. Her signature? She nodded. The next morning, Lily asked me to block all further visits. She was shaken, said she didn't want to see him again. I leaned against the wall, feeling the air leave my lungs. What did they talk about, Samantha? She hesitated. I don't know. But when he left the room, she looked terrified. That night, I returned home with the weight of her words pressing on my chest. I went into Lily's studio again, desperate for something, anything that could explain what Eric had been doing. That's when I remembered the letter she'd written to me, the part about protecting what we built. I pulled the letter from the drawer and reread it carefully. There, in the corner, I noticed something I hadn't before, a faint pencil mark beside the line about her lawyer. 3 small letters. LC. It took me a moment to realize what they meant. Lake Cabin. Our family's old lake house on the outskirts of Sulphur, Oklahoma. Lily's favorite retreat when she needed peace. I hadn't been there in years. I left before dawn the next day. The drive was 2 hours through winding rural roads. When I reached the cabin, everything was as we'd left it: dusty furniture, photos on the walls, and the faint smell of cedar wood. In Lily's old bedroom, behind a loose floorboard near the dresser, I found a small metal lockbox. My hands trembled as I pried it open. Inside was a flash drive, a stack of old letters, and a folded document labeled "Private for Dad Only." I plugged the drive into my laptop. It contained audio files, conversations between Lily and Eric. One was dated February 22nd, just weeks before she passed. Lily's voice, weak but steady. Eric, you're not getting a cent from me. You left me. Remember? Don't be dramatic. I gave you your start, Lily. I deserve something. You gave me nothing. You took everything I had. Maybe, but when you're gone, someone has to take care of what's left. The recording ended with the sound of a door slamming shut. I sat in silence, staring at the screen, my hands cold against the keys. Lily had known. She had sensed what was coming, and she'd left these breadcrumbs for me to follow. I copied the files and drove straight to Sarah's office. She listened to the recording twice, her expression darkening. This isn't just a divorce dispute anymore, she said. It's extortion, and maybe more. We're going to need everything. Hospital records, visitor logs, his phone history. As I left her office, she added quietly, Thomas, whatever he was trying to do, Lily stopped him. But he won't stop now that she's gone. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, heavy and low. For the first time since Lily's death, I felt something new, not grief, not fear, but resolve. Eric Dawson thought he could rewrite my daughter's story, but he was about to learn that even in death, Lily Walker still had the final word. By the time spring settled over Oklahoma, my life had turned into a storm of legal documents, interviews, and sleepless nights. The man who had broken my daughter's heart now wanted to bury her legacy under lies. Eric Dawson's lawsuit went public faster than I expected. Within days, news channels were calling him the grieving widower, and me the controlling father. Every newspaper headline was a twisted version of our lives. Widower claims father of late fashion mogul seized fortune, meant for family. Was Luna Apparel's founder manipulated on her deathbed? Lies. All of it. I stopped answering the phone. I didn't eat. I barely slept. But I kept one thing in my mind, Lily's voice, soft but steady, saying, promise me you'll protect what we built. On April 10th, the trial began at Cleveland County Courthouse in Norman. The air inside the courtroom was cold, heavy, and full of that metallic smell of nerves. Reporters filled the benches. Cameras flashed. Eric sat at the plaintiff's table in an immaculate gray suit, his hair slicked back, his lawyer Martin Vaughn beside him, like a vulture waiting for a carcass. Sarah Klein leaned toward me. Stay calm, she whispered. We'll let them talk first. Judge Elaine Porter, a woman with sharp eyes and a voice that could silence a storm, entered the room. Mr. Vaughn, she said, you may proceed. Vaughn rose slowly, buttoning his jacket. Your Honor, this is a tragic case. My client, Mr. Dawson, was the devoted husband of the late Lily Walker, founder of Luna Apparel. For years, he supported her dreams financially and emotionally. Unfortunately, their marriage suffered strain, but no divorce was ever finalized. When Mrs. Walker passed, her father seized control of her estate, denying my client his rightful inheritance. He turned dramatically toward me. We intend to prove that Thomas Walker manipulated his dying daughter to change her will under duress. The reporters scribbled furiously. Then Eric stood up, pretending to dab his eyes with a handkerchief. Lily and I, we were talking again before she died, he said, voice trembling. She told me she regretted the past, that she wanted to make things right. I just want to honor her wishes. The room murmured. For a second, I saw people's eyes soften until Sarah's hand on my arm reminded me, not yet. When it was our turn, Sarah stood, calm and deliberate. Your Honor, she began, this case is not about grief or love. It's about greed. The plaintiff abandoned Lily Walker 10 years ago, drained her savings, and left her to miscarry alone. He never contributed to her company or her success. And when he learned she was dying, he saw an opportunity not to reconcile, but to profit. Her words echoed through the courtroom. She opened a folder. We'll begin with Exhibit A. She pressed play on the small speaker sitting on the evidence table. Eric's voice. I'm not going to waste my time if she has nothing left. A ripple of whispers spread through the courtroom. Eric's jaw tightened. Then Sarah played the second recording, the one from Lily's hospital visit. You left me, Eric. You don't get to come back now. Eric, I deserve something. I was your husband. You were a ghost. The judge's pen froze mid-note. Even Vaughn shifted uncomfortably. Your Honor, Sarah continued, these recordings were authorized by Miss Walker herself and verified by the hospital's IT system. They show the plaintiff's intent to extort money from a terminally ill woman. Vaughn sprang to his feet. Objection! These recordings were made without my client's consent. Overruled? Judge Porter said sharply. Continue, Miss Klein. Sarah smiled faintly. Exhibit B, Lily Walker's notarized letter dated August 2014, confirming that Eric Dawson voluntarily waived any claim to her assets following their divorce. She held up the yellow document with a signature and seal visible even from the back of the room. Vaughn whispered furiously to Eric, but she wasn't done. Exhibit C, she said. Bank records showing Eric Dawson transferred $8,500 to a man named Raymond Steele, who later filed a false affidavit claiming he was an investor in Luna Apparel. The judge frowned. Mr. Vaughn, is this accurate? Vaughn hesitated. My client made personal loans. Personal loans? Sarah interrupted. Then why were two of those loan recipients scheduled as witnesses today? The courtroom gasped. Judge Porter turned toward Eric. Mr. Dawson, did you pay these individuals to testify? He swallowed hard. Of course not. Sarah stepped forward, eyes locked on him. Then explain why each payment occurred 10 days before they filed their affidavits. Eric's face flushed crimson. This is irrelevant. It's fraud, Sarah cut in. Plain and simple. The judge's gavel hit the desk. Enough. We will recess for 30 minutes while I review this evidence. The courtroom buzzed as people stood and whispered. I exhaled for the first time in hours. Sarah leaned toward me. He's cornered. He knows it. When court resumed, Judge Porter's expression was ice. This court finds that the plaintiff's evidence contains inconsistencies and possible fraudulent elements. Effective immediately, I'm ordering an investigation into witness tampering and perjury. Vaughn shot to his feet. Your Honor. Sit down, Mr. Vaughn, she said coldly. And you, Mr. Dawson, will remain available for questioning. Sarah whispered, We've got him. But the trial wasn't over yet. Vaughn still tried to claw back ground, producing a supposed updated will signed just 10 days before Lily's death, naming Eric as co-beneficiary. Sarah calmly asked to have it examined by our forensic expert. He testified under oath that the ink used for the signature had been manufactured 2 months after Lily's death. Gasps filled the room. Judge Porter leaned forward. Mr. Dawson, care to explain that? Eric's lips parted, but no sound came out. Sarah's voice broke the silence. Your Honor, this man has forged documents, paid witnesses, and exploited a dying woman's name. I ask that this court not only dismiss his claim, but refer his actions for criminal prosecution. The judge nodded slowly. I agree. The gavel struck once, sharp and final. The plaintiff's claim is dismissed. This court finds sufficient cause to open a criminal investigation into Mr. Dawson for fraud, perjury, and attempted extortion. Reporters exploded into motion. Cameras flashed. Eric's face drained of color as two officers quietly approached him. Sarah turned to me, her expression softening. "It's over, Thomas." But as I watched Eric being led out of the courtroom, he turned his head, locking eyes with me. There was no fear there, only hatred. He mouthed something I'll never forget. "This isn't over." And in that moment, I realized he meant it. Because men like Eric Dawson don't stop. When they lose, they get desperate. And desperate men can be far more dangerous than guilty ones. I thought that day in court would be the end. But I was wrong. The following week, I learned that when a man like Eric Dawson starts losing control, he doesn't surrender, he sinks lower. And the deeper he sinks, the darker the truth becomes. After the judge dismissed his lawsuit, the Oklahoma Bureau of Investigation officially opened a criminal inquiry. Sarah and I were asked to provide all evidence: Lily's recordings, the forged documents, the bank transfers, and the hospital visitor logs. Agent Robert Hale, a tall man with steady eyes and a calm voice, led the investigation. He sat across from me in Sarah's office one rainy afternoon, his pen tapping against a legal pad. "Mr. Walker," he said, "what you and your lawyer uncovered in court is only the beginning. We believe, Mr. Walker, Dawson may have committed a series of related crimes over the past decade: fraud, extortion, and possibly identity theft." I frowned. "Identity theft?" Hale nodded. "We traced Eric's financial history. His so-called consulting firm dissolved 5 years ago, yet he's maintained several active bank accounts under different aliases: Daniel Crane, Edward Lewis, and Marcus Reed. The same names he used when he called Lily's office." The room fell silent. Sarah folded her hands, her eyes narrowing. "So he's been planning this for a long time." "Longer than you think," Hale said. "We also discovered multiple women in 3 states who filed police reports against men with those same aliases. All of them described the same pattern: romantic manipulation, financial theft, and blackmail. Total losses exceeding $400,000. I felt my stomach tighten. He's been doing this to other women? Yes. And from what we can tell, Lily wasn't just another victim. She was his final target, the one he thought would set him up for life. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. My daughter had been dying while that man was plotting to turn her death into profit. That night, I sat in my kitchen, staring at the framed photo of Lily and me from her college graduation. I whispered, "You were right, sweetheart. You said someone would try to ruin what we built." The next morning, Sarah called. "Thomas, you should come to the office. There's something new." When I arrived, she was sitting beside a familiar face, Amanda Cruz, Lily's assistant. Amanda looked pale, her hands twisting in her lap. "Mr. Walker," she said nervously, "I found something you need to hear." She held up a flash drive. "It's from Lily's old laptop." She had a folder labeled "Final Notes." I didn't open it before because I thought it was personal. Sarah connected the drive to her computer. The first file was an audio recording dated March 5, 2024, 3 days before Lily's death. Eric's voice. "You don't have long, Lily. We both know it. Why not make peace? I can help handle your assets. You don't want your father dealing with all that stress. You don't care about my father. You care about my money. Money is part of life, sweetheart. Think about it. What happens to your company when you're gone? Wouldn't it be better if someone capable took over?" The tone in his voice made my blood run cold. "If you come near me again, I'll expose you. Every lie, every name you've used. Eric, you won't have the time." The audio cut off with a loud click. Amanda covered her mouth, trembling. She recorded him without telling anyone. I think she knew he was dangerous. Sarah's face was pale. "Thomas, this isn't just extortion. Those are threats." Later that afternoon, Agent Hale called us back to his office. "We've analyzed the recordings. Combined with the hospital visitor logs, it's enough for a federal warrant. But there's something else." He placed a photo on the table, grainy surveillance footage from the hospital. Eric leaving Lily's room at 2:17 a.m. on March 19th, 3 days before she died. In his hand, A folder. We believe that folder contained forged documents, Hale said. Power of attorney forms and a revised will. He probably tried to make her sign them. I felt sick. She would have never signed anything for him. She didn't, Hale confirmed. Our forensic team found partial fingerprints on the forged pages. His, not hers. And there's evidence he tried to falsify her signature afterward. Sarah exhaled. So he forged her will after she died. Hale nodded grimly. That's our working theory. But there's more. We pulled his phone records. He was in contact with a woman named Catherine Holt, a former accountant at Luna Apparel fired by Lily 5 years ago for embezzlement. We think she helped him access the company's financial systems. The name hit me like a slap. I remembered Catherine, polite, quiet, always carrying a smile that never reached her eyes. She's in this with him? I asked. Very likely, Hale said. They exchanged over 60 calls in the month before Lily's death. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed was worse than I'd imagined. Eric hadn't acted alone. He had an inside network, people who'd fed him information for years. As I left the bureau that evening, a storm was breaking over Norman. Lightning flashed behind the courthouse, illuminating the city skyline in brief, violent bursts. I stood there, watching the rain hit the pavement, and realized something important. This wasn't just a fight for my daughter's inheritance anymore. It was a fight for her truth. The next morning, Agent Hale called again. Mr. Walker, we just received confirmation from the forensic lab. The ink used on the forged will same batch used by a printing company tied to Catherine Holt. We also found Eric's fingerprints on the hospital's visitor pass. That's enough to issue warrants. By noon, both Eric Dawson and Catherine Holt were in custody. But my relief didn't last long. That night, as I sat alone at home, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You think this is over? Check your front porch. My heart pounded. I walked to the door, every instinct screaming that I shouldn't. There, under the porch light, sat a single envelope. No return address. Inside was a photograph. Lily's hospital bed, taken from the hallway. Her face pale, eyes half open. Written across the photo in black marker were 4 words. You can't protect her. I stood there in the rain, clutching the photo, trembling with fury and grief. Whoever had taken that picture wanted me to know something terrifying. Eric wasn't just manipulating her for money. He had been watching her. And as the storm thundered above me, one thought rose clear and cold through the chaos. I hadn't lost Lily to cancer alone. Someone had helped death find her sooner. For weeks, I couldn't look at that photograph without shaking. The sight of my daughter fragile, unaware, and spied upon during her final days cut deeper than any courtroom insult or legal fight. Someone had stood outside her hospital room, camera in hand, watching her die. That wasn't greed anymore, it was evil. The following morning, I drove straight to Agent Hale's office at the Oklahoma Bureau of Investigation. I didn't knock, I stormed in and dropped the photograph on his desk. This, I said through clenched teeth, was left on my porch last night. Hale picked up the photo carefully, examining it under the fluorescent light. This angle, this wasn't taken by a visitor. It's from a security corridor. Only staff and authorized personnel can access it. Sarah, who had joined me, leaned closer. So, whoever took this photo had hospital clearance. Hale nodded. And if the timestamp is real, it was taken the night of March 19th, 2024, the same night Eric made his final visit. The silence in the room was heavy. Hale exhaled, tapping his pen against the desk. I'll issue a subpoena for the hospital's full surveillance footage that night, and will question every staff member on the oncology floor. Over the next few days, I barely slept. Every ring of the phone made my stomach knot. I replayed the last time I saw Lily alive, how she smiled faintly, whispered, "It's okay, Dad," and squeezed my hand before the machines began to slow. And now, for the first time, I wondered if something else had hastened her death. 3 days later, Hale called. His voice was low, controlled, but I could tell something was different. "Thomas, we've reviewed the hospital footage. You need to come down here. You and Miss Klein both." When we arrived, Hale pulled up the footage on a large monitor. The timestamp read, March 19th, 2024, 1:48 a.m. The footage showed Eric entering the restricted wing using a security badge. He wore a black jacket and carried a folder. But that wasn't what stopped my breath. It was the badge name. C. Holt, Senior Accountant. Sarah froze beside me. Catherine Holt's ID? Hale nodded grimly. She had hospital clearance through a contact in accounting who managed insurance claims for Luna Apparel's employee health plan. That's how Eric got in unnoticed. The video continued. Eric entered Lily's room and stayed there for over 2 hours. At 3:55 a.m., he walked out carrying the same folder, this time visibly thicker. But then something new appeared on screen. Another man stepped out of the shadows near the hallway corner. He was wearing hospital scrubs. Hale zoomed in on the man's face. It took me a moment to recognize him. Dr. Nathan Clay, Lily's attending oncologist, the one who'd signed her final treatment order. Sarah whispered, "Oh my God." Hale's voice hardened. We checked the logs. Dr. Clay falsified the sign-in sheet that night, listing a routine medication adjustment, but the medication records show no adjustment was made. He paused, then added quietly, "However, there was an unexplained spike in Lily's morphine levels shortly before she passed." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. "You're saying he helped him?" "Possibly. But whether it was intentional or coerced, we don't know yet." I gripped the back of the chair, my knuckles white. What happened next? Hale switched to another clip footage from a hospital stairwell camera at 4:12 a.m. It showed Eric meeting Dr. Clay briefly. Eric handed him an envelope. Clay opened it, counted something money, and then pocketed it before walking away. Sarah covered her mouth. They made a deal. Hale nodded. "We've already taken Dr. Clay into custody for questioning." By that evening, the truth started unraveling like a rope snapping thread by thread. Under interrogation, Dr. Clay confessed that Eric had offered him $50,000 to adjust the dosage and make sure Lily was sedated when he came. The plan was to get her signature on the revised will and power of attorney documents using Catherine Holt's forged paperwork. But Lily had refused to sign anything. She had torn the papers in half and told Eric she'd rather die than give him control. So he waited until she was asleep. When the nurse left for her rounds, Eric handed Clay the envelope, half the payment up front, and asked him to increase the dose to calm her down permanently. Clay claimed he only gave her a small increase to quiet her agitation. But when investigators compared the records, the dosage she received was lethal for a patient in her weakened state. It wasn't an accident. It was murder. When Hale told me, I didn't speak for almost a minute. I just stared at the table, my heart thudding in my ears. "He killed her," I finally whispered. "He killed my little girl." Sarah put a hand on my arm, her voice trembling. "Thomas, I'm so sorry." Hale looked at me steadily. "We're charging him with second-degree murder and conspiracy to commit fraud. Catherine Holt will face additional charges for aiding and abetting." Later that night, as the news broke across every Oklahoma station, I sat on my porch under the dark sky, listening to the wind rush through the trees. Breaking news. Ex-husband of Luna Apparel founder charged with murder after inheritance plot exposed. The words echoed through my head. Reporters called it the inheritance crime of the decade. But for me, it wasn't a headline. It was the final confirmation of what my heart had known all along. Lily hadn't lost her fight to cancer alone. She'd been betrayed by the very man who once vowed to love her. As the night deepened, I looked up at the stars and whispered, "You fought him, sweetheart. You fought until your last breath. And now I promise I'll fight until mine to make sure he pays." I didn't know it yet, but the fight wasn't entirely over. Because Eric Dawson, even behind bars, had one more surprise left. When the news broke that Eric Dawson had been charged with second-degree murder, Oklahoma erupted. Headlines filled every paper from Tulsa to Oklahoma City. Talk shows debated the story for weeks. But while the world treated it like entertainment, I was just a father burying his daughter all over again, this time with the truth. The man who'd once claimed to love her hadn't just stolen her peace. He'd stolen her life. The trial began on July 15, 2024, inside the Oklahoma County Criminal Courthouse. The room was packed: journalists, lawyers, strangers, even Lily's former employees from Luna Apparel, all gathered to watch justice finally speak. Eric entered the courtroom in handcuffs, thinner, pale, and stripped of the arrogance he'd once worn like a tailored suit. His hair was longer now, his jaw rough with stubble. But when his eyes met mine, the same cold calculation burned there. He smiled, a faint, lifeless curve of the lips. I looked away. Judge Karen Holt, known for her sharp temper and iron fairness, presided over the case. On one side sat the prosecution team, led by District Attorney Raymond Navarro. On the other, Eric's new defense lawyer, a man who clearly understood the hopelessness of his assignment. "Ladies and gentlemen," Navarro began, standing tall before the jury, "this case is not about money. It's about betrayal. Eric Dawson didn't just try to steal from Lily Walker. He watched her dying, then tried to use her death as an open vault. And when manipulation failed, he made sure she would never speak again." He turned toward the defense table, his voice hardening. The defendant killed a woman who had already suffered enough. Every word sank deep into the room's silence. Over the next 2 days, the prosecution laid out a chilling trail of evidence: emails, phone records, hospital security footage, and the damning financial transfers to Dr. Nathan Clay and Catherine Holt. Then came the moment that silenced even the reporters. Navarro played one of the recovered audio files from Lily's laptop, her voice trembling, weak, but unbroken. "Eric, you can't keep coming here. You scare me." "You'll be fine, sweetheart. Just sign this, and I'll leave you in peace." "Lily," I said, "no. Get out." The recording ended with a sound none of us could ever forget, a faint cry, then silence. The courtroom was still. Even the jurors looked shaken. When Dr. Nathan Clay took the stand, his face was gray, his eyes hollow. He confessed everything: the bribe, the falsified chart, and the lethal dose of morphine. "I didn't mean for her to die," he said softly. "I just wanted the money. But when I saw her heart monitor slow down, I knew I'd crossed a line I could never come back from." Navarro's voice cracked like thunder. "And who gave you that money, doctor?" "Eric Dawson," he whispered. At that moment, Eric's mask finally broke. He slammed his hand against the table, shouting, "You're lying! I never told you to!" The judge's gavel struck sharply. "Order! Mr. Dawson, you'll be silent or be removed." The outburst sealed his fate. When the defense tried to argue that Eric had acted under emotional distress, Navarro countered by projecting photos of the fake will, the cash withdrawals, and the offshore accounts Catherine Holt had opened for him. "This wasn't emotion," Navarro said. "This was premeditation." On the 5th day, the jury deliberated for just 3 hours before returning with the verdict. "On the charge of second-degree murder," the foreman said, voice steady, "we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, guilty. On the charge of bribery and witness tampering, guilty." A gasp swept through the courtroom. Eric just stared forward, his hands trembling slightly as the cuffs tightened. Judge Holt looked directly at him. "Eric Dawson, you have not only taken a woman's life, but sought to desecrate her legacy. This court sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." It was over. When they let him out, he turned once more to face me. His eyes were hollow now, no arrogance, no pride, just the empty stare of a man who finally understood he'd lost everything. Afterward, outside the courthouse, a storm of microphones surrounded me. "Mr. Walker, how do you feel about the verdict?" one reporter asked. I looked at her camera and said quietly, "Justice isn't about feeling good. It's about finally letting someone rest in peace." And with that, I walked away. The following months were quiet. The headlines faded. The media moved on. But the echoes of Lily's laughter never left my house. There were moments when I caught myself expecting her to walk through the door, coffee in one hand, her sketchbook in the other. But the silence reminded me she never would. And yet, in that silence, something grew, a resolve. One evening, I sat in Lily's old office, surrounded by her drawings, her notes, her voice memos about new designs she'd never finished. Among them, I found a letter I hadn't read before, folded carefully beneath her calendar. It read, "Dad, if I'm gone, don't let what I built die with me. Use it to help others who've been abandoned or betrayed like I was. Pain can either destroy or transform. You always taught me that." That night, I made a decision. I sold Lily's company shares and used $15 million from her inheritance to establish the Lily Walker Foundation for Women Entrepreneurs, a nonprofit dedicated to helping women who'd been left behind financially, emotionally, or legally. The foundation offered free legal aid, startup funding, and counseling to women rebuilding their lives. And I asked Amanda Cruz, who had been like family, to serve as the director. When we opened our doors 6 months later, the first woman we helped was a single mother named Carla, who had been conned by her husband into losing her small bakery. The day we handed her the grant check, she cried, whispering, "You gave me my life back." I smiled and told her, "It wasn't me, it was my daughter." A year later, on March 22, 2025, exactly 1 year after Lily's passing, we held a small ceremony at the Foundation's new headquarters. We unveiled a plaque at the entrance that read, "For Lily Walker, who turned pain into purpose and left light in the darkest places." As I stood there surrounded by the women her legacy had already helped designers, teachers, single mothers, survivors, I finally felt peace. Sarah stood beside me, smiling. "She'd be proud, Thomas." I looked at the plaque, and my throat tightened. She already is. That night, as I locked up the foundation building, I looked out at the quiet Oklahoma sky. The stars shimmered faintly, just as they had the night she was born. And for the first time since she'd left this world, I didn't feel alone. Because her voice, her strength, her kindness was everywhere. In every woman she inspired, every business she made possible, and every life that rose from the ashes of betrayal. Justice had taken her killer, but Lily's spirit had taken back the world. True justice isn't found in revenge. It's found in rebuilding what evil tried to destroy. Lily's story reminds us that strength doesn't die with loss. It passes on to those brave enough to turn heartbreak into hope.